Okay, I welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is an audio and video show where we interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. This is a really special episode for me. I get a chance to talk to someone whose podcast and writing I've listened to for a really long time. A little bit about Deepak, or Chuck, as he's fondly known. So, Deepak is a marketing consultant, entrepreneur, podcaster, and writer. He runs a strategy studio called Rough Paper. He co-founded the 6% Club, which is a creator coaching program for working professionals. He has hosted 3 podcasts and written 2 newsletters. And in his most recent newsletter, The Things of the Internet, he is exploring the intersection of technology, culture, and humanity. Just before this podcast, I was reading one of his newsletters, and it's got me thinking about my relationship to music and so many other things. And in this conversation, Chuck, again, firstly, thank you, Chuck, for making time
Hey,
for
thank you
this.
for having me. This sounds, when you ping me with the stuff that you wanted to speak about, couldn't say no. So, delighted to be here, man. And thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah. And I know you've done this so many times. You've recorded so many podcast episodes. So I
Oh,
wanted to
trust me,
talk
I
about.
haven't. I really haven't. It's nice that you think so. But no. And it's been a while, I guess, as well. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to this too.
Yeah, and there were some elements I wanted to talk to you about that
Yep.
I know you've written a lot about, Chuck. For instance, I know you grew up in the Middle East. I thought we'd start off with that.
Yeah.
If you could tell me some stories about what it was like to grow up in the Middle East, let's just go from there.
Oh, okay. That's a pretty I didn't expect a start from there. I think in many ways, I okay. So first, for anyone who's listening who might think grew up in the Middle East, and right now the image of the Middle East might be the glitzy buildings of Dubai, and events happening every weekend and all that. My childhood was not that. I grew up in a small country called Bahrain, and not that Bahrain was boring or anything like that by any means. It's just that because it was very difficult to get around, you pretty much depended on your parents' car for even going to a friend's house. It meant that there was a lot of time spent on my own, doing. And while I do have a brother, the age difference was too much for us to really connect as brothers growing up. And I think in many ways, a lot of the hobbies, my way of looking at the world and all that, also is post facto, of course, was shaped by the slightly silent childhood that I had in Bahrain. Like, when I got into something, I just went down that rabbit hole almost completely. So I don't know if these count necessarily as stories, but my love for music really started over there. Like, we also didn't have cable growing up, if you can imagine. So when I used to come to India once every 2 years for my summer vacation, one of the things I used to look forward to the most was being able to watch cable TV, which meant cartoons, which meant some sports. WWF at that point of time was, kind of like the big thing for us and all that sort of thing. So suddenly there was a point in 1998 where we got access to cable. Because of some quirk, some engineer went up to the roof, did something, and somehow magically we got cable. Nobody was complaining. And suddenly it was kind of like this explosion of stuff that just came into my world. And from there I got into a lot of music. I mean, initially we went through the same cycles that many people would, right? Even though I landed on rock music later, it started off with the usual Bollywood, and then there was indie pop, and then rock music came in, so on and so forth. And then came cricket, which I got massively in a very short period of time, and then left it. I fell out of love with cricket later, and all sport in general later. More my fault rather than the sport's fault. So I don't know if those are really stories per se, but one story I will tell you, since you asked for it, and is one of my core memories, and it does have something to do with cricket, and it has something to do with the greatest ODI innings, one of the greatest ODI innings of all time. So the area that we lived in really didn't have that much cable. and whenever so cricket matches, key cricket matches would be shown only in a few places. There'd be some of our rich friends who had TV that had cable. There would be like the Indian Club of Bahrain or something like that that had, and then they would host screenings and stuff like that. So very few and far between. Your regular matches you really wouldn't watch. Sometimes you'd listen to them on the radio, and sometimes, and we didn't even have that much internet access those days. So even Cricinfo's rudimentary ball by ball update and all that. So all those things were like, we really didn't get to watch a lot of live cricket. One crazy thing happened. It's a small electronic shop a repair shop outside our home. Somehow that guy managed to get a feed of the tournament that was happening at that time, and that was the series in which the legend of Sachin was born, where he scored those two back-to-back centuries against Australia. And we went and saw what ended up being the Desert Storm innings, the 143 that he got against Australia. And I remember writing about this somewhere, that since then I have been to many concerts and I have been to a few sporting events, but nothing replicated that, that middle-aged Mallu energy of that, litter of 20 or 50 people crammed into a small electronics repair shop watching this game on this small TV, the only TV in the locality that had this match. And we knew something special. I mean, it was only my third or fourth cricket match really, but I knew, oh man, this is something special. This is probably not kind of stuff that happens every time. And I think that was very, very formative for me. Like my love for experience. I still remember that after so many years. I don't know if that's really a story, but that's the closest I have to an exciting thing that happened to me in the Gulf. Really, otherwise everything was really slow, man. I think I'm really thankful for my time in the Gulf. Really, I'm thankful that I didn't have a frantic childhood. I think because of that slow pace, I was able to appreciate whatever did come my way. Right? I mean, I'm not going to say like we were, um, uh, we were fairly privileged. Let me put it that way. Like we weren't very rich or anything like that. But again, at the same time, it made me appreciate experience. Like every year, every 2 years we would come to India and I'd get this huge stash of Archie comics, and I would go back in the next 2 years. I would devour it. I would reread it, like by heart everything. Like then there was a when I had to reread, I would say, okay, I read that last week, so the story is still fresh in my mind. Oh, I haven't read this for a while. Once in a while you'll find an Easter egg that you missed in the last 10-15 reads. I think, I mean, that was kind of, it was kind of nice doing that. Of course, we didn't know all this back then. All this concept of mindfulness and all that sort of thing is stuff that came to us, of course, much later as a factor of age and the age that we are living in. But yeah, I guess looking back with the wisdom of hindsight, I guess those are a few things that make me like Bahrain. And of course, Oman chips. Anyone who grew up in the Gulf has to say Oman chips as one of the top 5 things that happened in the Gulf. And if you have missed that out, I am very sorry for your loss.
Yeah, I completely relate to Oman chips. I grew up in Bahrain. It's a small world, and
Yeah.
that was something me and Deepak sort of connected on in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And even those stories about Bollywood, cricket, Indian club, and growing up in that small residential protected
Yeah.
sort of neighborhood, I think I was able to really relate to that. But Deepak, once you moved to India, this is
Yeah.
something that a lot of third culture, kids that grew up in another culture, but you still have this Indian identity. Was that a little bit of a struggle for you moving here, because you're in a way thinking about your identity? Was that something you ever grappled with when you moved back?
It's an interesting question. I will say that I did, right? I moved from Bahrain to Cochin when I transitioned from 10th to 11th, and that is in any case is kind of like one of the most vulnerable times in your own head. Like you're kind of struggling to figure out what your identity is, whether you're how you are being perceived by everybody else. All kinds of insecurities. You want to impress not just the girls but also the guys. It's at the same time you are kind of, while there is all this social pressure, much of which is self-inflicted, you have to also focus on your academics because it's 11th and 12th. I was very conscious of the fact that my parents, actually my mom and my brother, came with me to India where my dad stayed back in Bahrain. So I was very conscious that the family was making a sacrifice so that I could have a better school education over here and have a better shot at a better college when I was studying in Kerala itself. So there is that sort of pressure that's coming in. Plus, you're also kind of, apart from this, you're also just generally trying to find your way in the world, right? Like your new interests are coming. What do I want to be eventually? All these things. So I'd say that overall, that's a very sensitive time by itself. But to answer your question, I think I definitely felt this, right? I think like I was conscious that I was the kid who came from the Gulf, but at the same time, I got there on merit and not through one of those quotas or donation and stuff like that. So I kind of like almost felt this extra need to prove myself, both in terms of academics and in terms of creative. And I was not a good person. I was not a sports person at all. I absolutely, or maybe I don't want to say I sucked at sports, because I honestly never gave it a shot. I think that's one of the big things that I regret from childhood, not being more active on the playground per se. Right now, of course, I've tried to make up for it in my middle age by doing 100K cycle rides, but I think I'm just overcompensating for a lethargic childhood. I think that definitely did exist, because um, I landed up. I somehow managed to get good grades for my 10th standard, my 10th boards, which meant that I got entry into one of the better high schools in Cochin. And I was surrounded by cool kids, man. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, for me, I didn't know what to expect, to be very honest. I was aware of the fact that I was coming from the Gulf, which was supposedly cool, but I land up over here, everybody is infinitely cooler than me, because they've done stuff. There's somebody who is both top in acads and captain of the football of the cricket team, and then there are people who have just gone out and done treks on their own without their parents. There are people who have led things. There are people who do social service. There are there are good looking guys, good looking girls. There are people who sell things. There are people who are part of family business. Like, I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is like, how am I going to compete with anybody? And my Malayalam wasn't very good, so I didn't have that as a crutch to fall back on. My Hindi was terrible, so I kind of like didn't fit in anywhere. So I kind of like had to thankfully, mercifully, I had good English, and I had to kind of over index on that and the few skills that I had. I think a couple of things ended up happening over there, and we might accidentally segue into the content conversation that I'm sure you want to have. I think the first content project I did really is so one thing I was good at was cartooning sketches, etc. I had always won like drawing prizes and all that when I was in school. My mom is a biology teacher, and her drawing is like beautiful drawings. I guess I inherited part of it from there, but also it was a childhood of just growing up on Archie comics. You will remember Young Times from the Gulf, of course. So all those things, I just used to devour all of these. I used to love cartoons, cartooning, etc., and I used to just draw. I still have, if I were to draw my regular person right now, it's very apparent that I grew up on a diet of Archie comics. It's the same kind of caricatures and all that sort of thing. So I thought, okay, I am reasonably good at this. Let me try making comics on this milieu that I'm in right now. And one thing led to another. And it is with some level of immodesty that I will say that the comics that I drew started becoming a little hit in the three sections of my division, because they were so in jokes that they would make sense to anybody above and anyone below. But there were all kinds of things, right? Like how, and very silly plots, like how the evil physics professor was stealing all the samosas from the canteen, and then two people saved them, and then it was very random stuff. But one thing that gave me a lot of joy was it wasn't just silly plots. I was very proud of some of the Yeah, if you've ever read Mad magazine, right? Like there are these small little details in the background that really just give you that little sense of delight. I love doing stuff like that, and those were my Easter eggs for myself. If somebody else got them, then great. We communicate the same level. For everybody else, there is a silly plot of the overall thing, the very obvious jokes, the mannerisms of the professors, and the there was one guy in our batch who was famous for saying "Bah" whenever he was confronted with a situation like a professor asking him a question. So I viewed those, and these were all very easy gags and jokes. I guess in many ways those became my first content project, and it in a way it gave me a sense of identity because I finally had kind of like a role. It seems like there were all these cool guys and me. Okay, it's not much, but I was able to draw these comics, which for a brief moment of time went viral within the 3 classrooms. I found it very happy. Like when I drew stuff, and then first I would circulate it among here, like, oh, Deep's drawn a cartoon again. Let's see, check out. And it was a book. It was a proper story. I would buy a book, and I would like there were about 20 pages or something of that sort, and then it would circulate to the other class and all that sort of thing. Once I think one of the professors actually got hold of it, and he was a sport, so he took it in the spirit that it was supposed that it was never meant to be malicious, right? So I think he took in the spirit as well, and I think that is cool. I mean, that is pretty cool. Like I think some people started looking at me slightly different. As a result of that, it definitely gave me the confidence. It felt like, I'll be very honest, I think that happened because of my insecurities at the time, and I forced this out, and it felt like, okay, I deserve this place now. I have a seat at the table, right? Oh yeah, you guys have done you're great at acads and you're great at cricket. You happen to be great at both. You're this, you're that. I can at least draw comics and make some of you laugh. So a lot of this came from my sense of insecurity. I have another similar story when I get to college, but we'll talk about that later. But I hope that answers to some extent the question that you asked a while before. Wow, I haven't thought about those comics for a long time. Thanks for making me think of them. Unfortunately, I don't have any of them. Still, I think I had like scanned and uploaded some of them on my Facebook account some 10 years back. I genuinely have no idea whether I still have my Facebook login, and if I do, whether this is still up there. But if it is, I'll maybe send a link across, and if you can put it up on an archive or something, put a link or something in the notes. But yeah, I hope that answers the question, Rav.
No, that was amazing, Chuck. Because I know in the 6% Club, you and Utsav do talk about this really actively. The fact that you're not often creating content for a monetizable project. You're creating it
Yeah.
for yourself at the end of the day. And the way you spoke about creating those comics and the sense of self-esteem that it gave you, I think
Yeah.
so many adults in a lot of ways want that little bit of
Yeah.
self-esteem, little bit of connection. And I really feel that is the primary purpose. Sometimes we create something, we really
Yeah.
want to, because I feel as a human being, that is one of our essential sort of activities, to connect with each other through
Yeah.
creating something. And I love how you spoke about that from your childhood. And I feel like that was sort of the seed of all the content projects, you've sort of built and,
I mean,
sustained.
I won't dispute that. It's a nice story to say. To be very honest, till I spoke about those comics, I didn't draw that connection myself. So thank you for making me think of it. But yeah, I guess in some ways they were, right? Because I think it's also important to call it a project, because otherwise you would be doodling random things at the back of notebooks or something like that. When you say a content project, I think there's a sense of, um, uh, it's a certain outcome. It's a difference between an ingredient and a dish, if that makes sense, right? And it's also the difference between a dish and kind of like a 5-course meal where you're getting something together. There's a sense that this has been thoughtfully packaged and put together, and there might be more coming like this in the future. Like, again, a musician releasing a random set of notes versus an album, there's kind of like, okay, this is a project by itself. So in that sense, yes, these books, these little things that I drew were definitely the first content projects that I did. And I suppose the next one would many years later be the first podcast that I started, with a whole bunch of random things in the middle, of course. But yeah, I guess that way, yes. I also do think that this the point that you said, right, about creating for yourself, I think it's important. I think it's very important to, okay, I won't say that everyone should create for themselves. Let me make that very clear, right? Just because I run a program I don't want to say that everybody is going to end up deriving happiness by creating something. I do feel that it's important for everyone to have something that they can call a hobby, something that they can call, I call it an enthusiasm, something that they can get immersed in. For some people, that might be creating, right? And the aim of this is strictly non-monetary. It has to start off at least as being non-monetary. Only then can it be pure. Otherwise, you're always worried about, how is money going to come in? What are other people going to think about it? To be very honest, like the acid test for many of these projects is, if you were to do it and you want to tell anybody else about it, would you still want to do it? I think that's a very, very simple test for you to see whether what you're doing is really for yourself or if it's for somebody else. And it's okay if it's for somebody else, but just that it's important to kind of be aware of that so that you can then align your head and the other things that you do accordingly. I think being a marketer who has one foot in strategy, I also think that just having clarity on objectives is half the problem by itself, because then you're just making sure everything that you do is kind of aligned to that or not. So it's sometimes life can be binary that way. That's just saying, is this yes or no? And it's okay, it's completely okay if you say no, but just have the clarity on whether it's here or here so that you can. Sorry, we ended up deviating and talking about a whole bunch of other random things, as I'm sure a lot of my answers will end up being if you've seen my interviews before. But yeah, I hope that ends up adding a little more color and context to what you said.
Yeah, and I think that's what we really want with these conversations, Chuck, because it's so hard to condense all of your life experience in a, like an hour-long
Yeah,
conversation. And I think it's these stories that we actually remember
yeah,
over the
yeah.
long term. But
You do, yeah. Humans
Chuck,
are wired to listen to stories. You remember stories. People remember stories. Even if it's like a B2B example or something, you remember particular people, particular things that happened. And this is not a sentimental thing. It's just the way we humans have evolved. Anyone who's read *Sapiens*, for example, will know the importance of stories. Stories condense a lot of information. They synthesize a lot of information into something that is very pithy, and you can take it to the next level by adding music to it. So music is fundamentally important to humans. Not right now. I mean, right, it's very recent that music has been used for as an entertainment form, but back then it was a vehicle to effectively communicate information in a day and age where storing information was difficult. You didn't have even writing invented at that form a point of time, let alone things like cloud drives and even books. So yeah, I think it's from that same place that uh, why stories and storytelling is so important to our species is kind of like that. And I think you can still tap into that today. People will remember a person's story rather than the moral of the story or the or the point that it is trying to make.
for sure, yeah. And because you studied engineering for 4 years and then you did a 2-year graduate degree on communications,
Yeah,
what I wanted to ask you, Chuck, is what is your relationship to those two subjects? At least, what is your memory of studying engineering and studying? Because these are two very distinct
yeah,
fields, and I want to know what was going on in your head while you, studied these, but also jumped to a
yeah.
parallel
Okay,
field.
so I mean, listen, the simple answer. Okay, so I'll take this at two levels, right? One is what I studied, and two is what happened to me. At the first answer, very simple. I got into engineering because I had no idea what careers existed out there. I liked chemistry when I was studying in 11th and 12th. Yes, I was one of those weirdos. And I thought, chemical engineering, why not? Maybe I'll go back to the Gulf and work in oil or something like that. This was literally my thought process. And I got into engineering. I mean, it was okay and whatever. Like, I thought, okay, if this is what I need to do for life, sure, why not? Because I genuinely did not know any better. Um, sometime during engineering, I learned about advertising. I always liked ads, even as kid. Even as a kid growing up in the Gulf, I would record ads and all this. So I had a soft spot for ads, but I never thought I'd end up working in it, working in advertising. And then I learned about, as I was trying. I mean, once you get into college, you kind of start exploring what else is out there, right? And I came across. I came across the concept of advertising agencies, and then there's a certain strategy to this. It's not just people randomly, making the images and videos that you see, but there's a certain thought process behind how it's done. There's research done, and there's strategy, and then there's creative, etc., etc. And I was fascinated by that, and I said, okay, for the first time in my life, I seem to have some kind of direction. I don't know whether it's the right thing, but it's direction. So let's go all in on that. So I was I put all my efforts then to make sure that I pass engineering. I mean, a little more than pass. I had a little more pride than just 40%. But every other waking hour was trying to make sure that I get through to MICA, which was the best institute for communications management in the country. And there I studied a lot. Yes, I learned a lot about the concepts of communication. It really did open my mind in many ways, because not just because of subjects by themselves, but also the peer group that I was exposed to, right? If Gulf to Kerala was one set of opening up mind, this just exploded it completely, at every level, at cultural level, at how different kind of people can be in terms of relationships with your own and the other gender, so on and so forth, right? Whole bunch of things happened. That's fairly straightforward. But I think what ended up happening, Abhishek, at a deeper level, I think these two places changed me very differently. And actually, I will actually say that the 4 years in engineering actually changed me more as a person than the 2 years in MICA, which surprised me when I came across that realization for the first time once I reflected on it many, many years later. In fact, last year, I had the opportunity to just go visit my college between a cousin's wedding and Cochin airport. And I just went over there and I felt very nostalgic. I was there after almost 20 years, and I realized that this place actually changed me more than the 2 years of MICA did. And maybe I forgot that in the, you kind of like, when you're leaving a job, you kind of like want to leave everything of that behind and look forward to the new glitzy, glamorous thing that you're going into. And I kind of like felt maybe I treated my engineering college life a little unfairly, because I was so keen on running away from it. And while that was definitely true for the academics, what I what I realized only much later was that those 4 years really forged me as a person. A lot of my likes, a lot of the way I speak, like I got the confidence to go do public speaking and all that. Made a fool of myself on stage several times with the band that we had back in college. All those kind of things. Tried a lot of experiments. Saw because I was away from home properly for the first time, saw what various people do with their spare time and with money, became aware of a lot of things, etc., etc. So I think as a person, and in terms of my likes and all that sort of thing, especially with respect to music, that happened in the 4 years of engineering. I think MICA, to be very honest, was more of a finishing school, really. Like, it was more polished, really. And yes, I won't say that, I didn't completely learn nothing apart from the classroom over there. I did learn a lot more about, dealing with various kinds of people. And I think I became slightly more open-minded when I was at MICA, because the nature of the environment and the pedagogy, not just of MICA but in B schools in general, just forces you to do that a little bit. And I think it was over there that for the first time I actually had this sense that, happiness is what you make of it. I mean, I won't say that I had this wisdom at that point of time, but I definitely felt a seed of it over there, because MICA as an institution is a place, at least at that point of time, this was 2007 to 2009 I'm talking about. Things are slightly different today. It took a certain kind of weirdo to choose MICA over others. And I say the word choose. If you are getting into it because the IIMs rejected you and whatever, and this was your fifth option that you got into, fair enough. Then this is just one of the other B schools along the way. But there were some weirdos, and I was one of those, for whom MICA was not just one of the top options, but in many cases the only option. I was very clear, and I know this sounds slightly silly to say, if I had a offer from one of the IIMs and MICA, I would have still chosen MICA because I saw myself doing more over there. It resonated with me more and that sort of thing. So it takes a certain kind of weirdo to choose MICA over everybody else. So back then itself, I had this sense that, oh, this is a destiny you can craft yourself. You don't need to be for the rat race. You don't need to get into finance or investment banking because they pay more. A big salary is not the only thing that really matters. And I could sense that this was a bit of an outlier thought, because at that time everybody was just looking at, okay, what's the biggest package that you can get. I won't say that I wasn't swayed by it, right? Even within MICA there are like levels of, okay, do I go for the high rank paying brand job or the lower paying agency job, etc., etc. So you kind of reconcile with all of these things. But then I think it was there for the first time that I guess I kind of thought that, hey, you know what, there is not one predetermined merit path or something like that. You really can choose whatever you like, and you end up meeting other weirdos, and you end up being taught by other weirdos who kind of like decided to do whatever they can. They could have come here on a helicopter, but instead they chose to work in an agency, and they chose to do this and chose to do this, and whatever, some things seem cool to you at that point of time. Yeah, I guess both of these things were very important for me in very different ways.
Yeah, I think it's so fun to talk to you, Chuck, because the way you talk about these stories is with so much passion, and not a lot of people remember these things so vividly and are able to reflect on it. And it's something, it's almost like I'm living those times with you in a little way, right? And but there's something I heard in your conversation with Utsav, Chuck, where you were speaking about this band you had in college, and what I noticed in your tone was a level of hesitancy to speak about that experience and the people you were playing with. But I was reading your recent piece about finding your internal algorithm, and the way you articulated your thinking as a listener to music was something I'd not read for a very long time. So my question to you, Chuck, is how has your relationship to music changed over time? And the reason I'm asking you this is because I have struggled with this. For a very long time, I always felt guilty about telling people what music I like listening to.
Yeah.
Because I felt it would tell something vulnerable about me. But the way you spoke about it was you didn't worry about what other people really thought about you. But yeah, how has your relationship to music
No, I think
changed?
it has. It's changed a lot. It's something. Okay, let me put it this way, Abhishek. I feel that in many ways, the way I think about music right now is actually helping me figure out everything else in life as well. I know I know it's kind of weird, but it's almost like how my relationship with music and my changing relationship with music is kind of like a testing ground for me to understand more about myself, which I'm then able to apply to other aspects of life, including work, including fitness, including my relationship with my wife, friends, etc., etc. So it's very important. For me, my changing relationship with music is very important. But since you asked, and this question in particular, if you don't stop me, I could end up talking for 2 hours. So please stop me, or get me back to a point when you see if it's music has always played a role in my life. Interestingly enough, when I was growing up, it would be these cassettes and things like that. But I think at that point of time, I was more fascinated by the concepts of cassettes rather than the music by itself. Like, oh wow, there's all this music in this little reel over here. I'd have my favorites, of course, but I was more interested in playing with the tape by itself. Then after that, being a good South Indian boy in the Gulf, my parents shipped me off to Carnatic classical coach training and all that, which I did for a while. I was okay at it, and I enjoyed it more for the company of the friends who I was going with rather than the music by itself. Although I think it's hard to go through 8 years of something without it having some kind of imprint on your mind. So I'm definitely sure that my love for melody and all that, which I have right now, came from that, even if I can't name a ragam now to save my life. But apologies to my teacher. She was a wonderful teacher, and she tried her level best. Then after that, I think when I in the teenage years, right, late teenage years, I'm saying around eighth onwards, is when you kind of like want to start developing your own sense of identity and want it very distinct from your parents, importantly. And MTV came into my life at around that time. So this was a period of very rich exploration for me. It was still very much rooted in what was the popular thing of the day. Like it would still be the Backstreet Boys or the A.R. Rahman / Anu Malik, depending on which side, what the usual paths that somebody would take. But I, even at an early age, early musical listening and appreciation age, I realized that I had this, like, I would seek out things that others weren't. I'd take like a popular song. I wasn't very swayed by something just because it was the most popular thing. I mean, there were a lot of I think like some of my favorite Bollywood songs were not necessarily the chart busters, but kind of like a very melodic, broody song that we buried somewhere deep in the album. So as a result of which, I kind of like wanted to listen to the full thing just to make sure that I haven't missed out on anything, so on and so forth. Then when I went into college, I started getting more into English music. I started playing the guitar also at that point of time. So you start listening to music also slightly differently now. When you play an instrument, you listen to music differently. This is like, I guarantee this, and this is not just for music, I say for anything. If you start learning how to cook, you will appreciate food that is coming into your home also slightly differently. Once you understand what it takes to build something, you build empathy for the entire thing, I feel. Again, this journey of discovering music, trying to play the guitar, etc., all that carried through till college, to MICA, my post-grad, etc. And it evolved. There was a lot of things that I was exposed to, and I think, I mean, I'm going to gloss over a lot of the micro things that happened, and get to, when I started working in Bombay, two things ended up happening. I started going for a lot of live shows, which I really enjoyed. Growing up in the Gulf, obviously no shows there. When you're in a engineering college in a small town in Cochin, small town in Kerala, not that much option apart from seeing other bands perform and all that. I did, again, when I glossed over my band sort of thing, there were some good things and some bad things, but it's not really pertinent to the story by itself, apart from the fact that, of course, I learned how to appreciate music a little better, and I really had a lot of fun playing in bands and, just making music together. It just felt magical that four people with mediocre skill could come together and still make something that resembled music, right? Live music happened. I also had a fair bit of free time. I started diving into discographies of bands a little more, and I think somewhere over there, my not self-given identity as a person who likes music, keeps up with music, etc., I think that somehow came about. I think around the same time I started getting into audiophile gear, so I kept upgrading headphones, etc., before I got my fairly lovely stack system that's sitting right behind me. And the story till I would say that the story till around 2020 was somebody who just kept listening to a whole bunch of things, thought that the niche that I was going to get into was, say, something like progressive rock, progressive metal, think Porcupine Tree, Dream Theater, that sort of thing. And I think somewhere along the way, sometime after that, again, I'm skipping a lot of details just to be able to get to the question that you actually asked for. I think sometime over the last 2 to 3 years, specifically, Abhishek, I have been doing a lot of thinking about why do I like the kind of music that I actually do, right? Because I think a fundamental shift for me was kind of appreciating that there is no one music that is necessarily better than the other, right? I wasn't a snob necessarily before. I made it a point to not look down upon people who are listening to lighter music or something, but it's almost like, you don't need to necessarily graduate. This is not a game of graduation that you say that, oh, you started listening to Backstreet Boys, you graduate to Bon Jovi, you graduate to Metallica, you graduate to Dream Theater. Not necessarily. There's as much nuance to be found in any one of these as there is in one of these. And then I started thinking more and more about, okay, why do I kind of like the music that I do? At the same time, I'm aware that there is a graduation even above this, which I'm unable to get into. So for a long time, I was kind of struggling with, okay, what is it that I'm not getting? I would re-listen to a song again and again. And I'm like, why am I not getting this? Why is this not hitting? Like, this is the band's number one song on Spotify. Why am I not able to appreciate the masterpiece that this song is? And at the same time, a song that I thought was really nice, why is it so underrated? Why are other people not appreciating it, etc., etc.? Like things like that. So I started getting a little more fundamental as to why I like the music that I do. And again, these are not earth-shattering revelations that I'm going to say. I'm just realizing that everybody likes music for different reasons, and maybe they even have different times that they like different kinds of music, right? And once I started thinking about that, it fundamentally changed my relationship with music. There's something I did last year, which I think was probably in my musical journey, one of the most important things I did. I felt somehow this compulsion and need to keep up, right? Like, I don't know where this identity came from. This, again, completely self-given identity. Yeah? So it's all these are all mistakes of my own making. I think around 2018 or something like that, I started sharing a song every day on Twitter. Right. Again, this was a phase when I thought of myself as kind of like a rock critic, and I have evolved music taste. Look at all these concerts I go to. I work at OML. Look at how cool I am. It's just that's kind of like that identity you build up in your own head, right? I don't know for what reason, but hey, I can't even say I was young because I was freaking like early 30s or something at that point of time. Just stupid, I suppose. So I started doing this song a day sharing thing, and to cut a very long story short, that song a day that I used to do on Twitter eventually morphed into today what is 1,500 strong community across Telegram and WhatsApp. So I am now the admin of this group of people, and my promise to them was I will share one song every day. So it kind of felt this compulsion to keep up with new music releases almost, right? And I used to get very tense when there was something from the past that I haven't heard, or oh shit, there's another album that's being released which I have to yet listen to, or my to listen to list has ballooned to 50-60 hours. How am I ever going to get to all of this and listen to all the other things I want to? Like, I promised somebody I would listen to their album, and I always wanted to explore old Mallu music. At the same time, I want to revisit the Bollywood songs. So it started becoming too much. And I know this sounds very weird because you're talking about music over here and it's not like work or health or something like that, but it genuinely felt, I think at one point of time, I could say with a lot of confidence that I was treating music like a chore. And once a hobby becomes a chore, I realized, okay, something needs to happen over here, and I don't think this is something that can be phased out. This is something that has to stop right now. So I asked myself the question, let's take the nuclear option. What if you decided to stop keeping up with new music releases? Okay, what does happen? I was very proud of two end of year playlists that I made. Right? I was like, oh, this is carefully curated. I know exactly the order of my 1 to 20, all that sort of thing. Right? Who cares? Who gives a crap? Right? Like, there's plenty of other stuff out there. If you don't do this, there chances are one or two songs might slip under the radar. So I asked myself all these questions. I know it again sounds extremely weird to say, but I think for me, a big step was just deciding to let go of all of these things. One night, I said, that's it, we are taking this the best of the year 2024 so far got deleted, to listen to got deleted, and a whole bunch of other WIP playlists also got deleted. And initially there was panic, but after that there was like this overwhelming sense of relief. It's like nothing has changed. One or two songs you might end up missing, that is completely fine. So then I was searching for, okay, now what do I do? And then I just said, you know what, let's go back and listen to the stuff that you always meant to. That there are greats out there which you haven't got around to. Let's start with those. So I started exploring Michael Jackson. I started exploring Duran Duran. I started like getting to Spotify playlists that just said best of 80s and just going through one by one. And I kid you not, Abhishek, in the one and a half odd years since I have done this, I think I've discovered more favorite songs than the 5 or 6 years before then. And I have hence started thinking more about why I like these songs. Like currently, right now, I'm on a complete 80s trip. That synth driven, highly melodic music from the early 80s is completely my jam, especially if there's a level of broodiness to it. So this made me think more and more about, and this ties back to that article that you were referring to, the internal algorithm one. It made me think about made me think even more about why I like the songs that I do. It gave me a lot of edge cases. Okay, here's a person who likes Ghost of Perdition by Opeth, who likes The Chauffeur by Duran Duran, who happens to like Inteha by Bappi Lahiri, and who happens to like, say, whatever, Broken by Mother Jane. So I'm trying to take all these extreme cases and see, okay, what ties all of these things together. Exploring that kind of stuff has really, really helped. So now for me now, music listening is absolute delight, because I've just opened myself up to a lot of possibilities. And if there is something that I have given I'm still, I suppose, I can't give into randomness completely. So what I do right now is, there are two folders. This my music journey is ending in this. It's the story of two folders. There is gold and there is silver. I suppose you can figure out, what these two folders will sort of contain. I have strict qualification criteria for what makes it here and what makes it here. Happy to dive into that if you know, but I think it might be irrelevant. But basically now music has become more, okay, let's enjoy this. Let's actually see more stuff that's coming. Like recently, like this Sunday, a Sunday before we are recording this, I spent 2.5 hours on a complete whim and decided to listen to Coke Studio Pakistan. And it was the best 2 hours that I've spent in a long time, because one of the things that you keep thinking, okay, eventually I'll get to it. Eventually we'll sit and download all of them, listen to from season 1 to season 19, 20, whatever it is. Nothing. I just went there, one best of playlist is there. Okay, this is cool. Oh, this is too overtly religious. Oh, no, not working. Whatever. Oh, this is good. Let's get to more of these. So just, who is this? I want more from this singer. Go down that rabbit hole. So it's become that. So music listening has become very much more joyous for me. It has also allowed me to indulge in my favorite songs. I know that sounds like a weird statement, but I'll explain what I mean by that. It means that I am able to now take these songs that I've carefully put in my gold folder, and I can go back to them and just devour them again and again. And I've kind of realized over time that for me, the best songs, my favorite songs, and this may not be the case for everybody, so I don't want to generalize. For me, I realize that I like a particular song. I really like a particular song when I realize there is so much more to discover within the song itself. It's almost like when you go to a city on vacation, for 5 days, and then you say, oh man, I just want to come back again because it feels like I've just scratched the surface. For me, that is how I get very excited when a song gets into the gold folder, because like, oh man, there is just so much more to discover over here. I can't wait for the next time. Next time I'm going to be listening to this again. So this entire framework of how I have changed my music consumption over the last, say, 1.5 years or so, I have now tried to take lessons from that and adapt it to other aspects, especially places where I feel like overburdened with input. Let's take, for example, media, right? Media. And when I say media, I mean, say, news, newsletters, and all that sort of thing. I think there is this phase in your 30s where you feel the need to consume everything and think that you actually can consume everything. And it's just a matter of finding that one weekend or whatever. I realize that is not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I think a big part of, for me, uh, I really had to force myself to say, you are not going to be able to read every newsletter, every newspaper, every website, etc., etc. Even your favorite magazine, you will not be able to read cover to cover every month. Admit it, get with it. Now, this is the paradigm. What can we do best from here? Right? For me, just having the courage to say that to myself, and again, I know this sounds very weird to say because we're talking about like articles and music over here, but for me, that really did help me sort a lot of things in life. For example, and I will admit this works for me right now, but it is a highly imperfect process. So it's not something that I may recommend to everybody. I'll tell you what I do right now. For example, um, I um, if I see an article I like and I don't have the time to read it right now, I will save it to an articles folder in my on my toolbar. So the bar to get there is fairly high, because you're like, will you actually read this? You know, will a boss, are you actually going to read this, or just because it's a nice thing to nice? There's sometimes where I will just use AI to summarize. Here's the article. Please summarize this for me in 2 bullet points. So I get, there are things that you read for information, and then there are things that you read for pleasure. And I think that again, it's important to kind of segregate those out. Um, the articles folder on the last day of every month gets purged completely. So there might be 30 must read pieces in there. They're gone. On the first of every month, it has to start with zero. So right now, for example, there are only about 5 or 6 pieces in there. And I don't look at what they are, because then I'll start feeling attached to them. Nahi, yaar, we'll just give in one more week. Nahi hoga. If the article is that important, it will come back to you. Just like if that song is that good, it will come back to you in your life. It will be referenced later, etc. So I think, again, I know this is a highly imperfect process, but it just helps me sleep better at night without worrying that my to-do list or to read list has piled up so much. I think it's just that. Yeah, I think between music and how I treat now newsletters, articles, etc., you probably got a sense of how I at least try to deal with too much input coming in and try to maintain some sense of sanity. That's number one. And number two, as the process of doing this, you start getting better at identifying what it is that you are drawn to. So if I may go back to the music example, just to close this entire loop up, I said I was getting very overwhelmed with the new amount of music that I was listening, that was coming my way. But now, to use the term that I used in the article that I wrote, my internal algorithm for knowing what music I like allows me to get through that list quickly. So today, that same 2-hour playlist, which I might have spent 1 hour on, I guarantee I'll be able to get through it in 10 minutes, because I'll be able to get to the songs that I want to very quickly. And then from there, like, okay, now let's give these guys a shot. So right now, for example, on my Spotify and Apple Music, I favorite a few songs that, like, this इसमें potential है इसमें, right? And the others are like, go, I don't need you right now. And I get into those, spend a little more attention over there. So it's really a matter of, like, choose, like, figuring out the few that you're going to evaluate. And then from there, okay, do you make the gold list? Do you make the silver list or not? So I think that's kind of like a framework I've kind of tried to apply to everywhere else. It's been really useful for me. It's really helped me avoid FOMO. And I think the avoiding FOMO is something that is so useful to everything else. For example, there are a whole bunch of huge international music acts that are coming to Bombay in the next few months, right? And all of which should be right up my alley in terms of the genre I follow. Not just rock, but like progressive rock. Steven Wilson's coming, Textures is coming, Smashing Pumpkins is coming, Guns N' Roses came. I didn't go for any. I'm not planning to go for these, and I haven't gone for any of those, because again, I like somehow that FOMO. I mean, I still wish I could go and all that, but again, I stay in Pune. There's a certain time, effort, money, etc., to travel all the way to Bombay and all that sort of thing. But again, it's allowed me to, like, just let go and not be too worried, because there's enough to do over here. If you're able to apply this in places where and this is the experiment I'm trying now, if I'm able to apply this in places where there is actual money on the line, and I don't mean with respect to work, but like, if I were to reconcile myself and say that for the rest of your life you're going to travel only within India, would you be okay with that? I think I'm at a point where I would say, yeah, that's fine. That's completely okay. I don't want to sound like some self-actualized guru or something like that, right? There are some parts of the world that I desperately want to see, especially the diving spots of Indonesia. But if you were to tell me, you know what, there's enough to do. There's enough to do in this. There's enough to do in this country. There's enough to do in the state that I stay in. We have everything over here, and I think it's more about getting more out of the moment than you are in, rather than hoping for what could have been, if that sort of makes sense. Like, if you were to say that the next 1 year you're going to travel only within the state of Maharashtra, um, I think it might be human instinct, and at least for a privileged male of who's been used to a certain standard of whatever and what society tells you, etc. Say no, no, no. How can you deprive me of my vacation in the UK or my dream of diving in the Galapagos or whatever? You feel almost entitled to this. But then if you're able to slow down and appreciate that, you know what? No, boss, this tiny trek that you have near your home is as delightful as climbing the Machu Picchu or whatever. So it really forces you to think about, why should I go there? Like, what am I going to get from an experiential point of view? It's one thing I've realized, for example, I don't care too much about architecture and stuff like that. If that's the case, then yes, you have to go to Rome to see those buildings, but hey, there are so many things that India is possibly number one at, or has as good an experience of. So, all these things, I know it's a huge random word salad of an answer I gave you, but between music, travel, life, etc., I'm just trying to, I guess, find an internal algorithm for all of these put together.
No, I like
Damn,
for
that is a
me.
crazy long answer. I'm sorry.
No, I think in a lot of ways that was like a love letter to music, and I think that's the beauty of the
Yeah.
audio form, because
Yeah.
we're not trying to restrict our words in a very particular pattern, Deepak. In a lot of ways, I'm so glad we had that conversation, because for someone to I think at every point in our life, our minds are changing.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
answer to the
Yeah.
same question next year will be very
Will be very
different
different. Yeah. Will be
based on,
very different. Yeah.
and I think the benefit we have of audio technology is to have these extended conversations where you or me are not trying to cut short or limit what the person is thinking. And I
Yeah.
feel like in the process of listening to you speak about that, there were so many thoughts that sort of stuck with me. For instance, when you said that you learned Carnatic music for 8 years, or that you played in a band for so long, I started wondering, was that when the sort of foundation for Chuck's, long-term relationship really set? Because you said that point about how someone that plays music listens to it very
Yeah.
differently. And that's when I realized, I think that's what I was always missing. Because I always try to intellectualize music,
Yeah.
where I
Yeah.
would see a musician, I'll be like,
Yeah.
why don't I understand the politics of this musician? Why
Yeah.
don't I understand the history of this song? But listening to you, realize that it's more of an emotional,
Yeah.
the technical part of someone using just a tool to create something that moves you is so much more profound than trying to connect with them intellectually only, though I think both of
Yes.
them have their benefits.
Oh,
and
100%, 100%.
and
I think different people seek different things from, different kind of art forms. Have you
true,
ever had the good fortune to be to a Blackstrat Blues concert?
I
Warren
have.
Mendonça? Yeah.
I've seen them here in Bombay during the
Yeah.
Mahindra Blues Festival,
Oh,
and
lovely, lovely. What
I
a great
love.
setting. So,
Yeah,
one thing I love about Blackstrat Blues concerts specifically is that you will be able to, if you're a seasoned enough gig attendee, especially in the city of Mumbai, you'll be able to segregate the audience into, various cohorts. There are some people who will listen to just Blackstrat Blues and will not listen to any other rock band. And it's very evident, right, who these people are. There are some people who come there to study what Warren is playing. Oh, ye chord. Oh, this chord he's playing. Oh, diminished seventh. Like they'll have those conversations. Or like every Blackstrat Blues gig, there'll be 5 geeks at the front. Oh, like kya pedal hai yaar? Like they'll be discussing the pedal, all the settings, all that. So you have between these two extremes, you have everybody else, right? You have people who were zero acolytes, which is of course Warren's old band, and then there are people who have never heard of Zero at all, and they love Warren independently. So it's a beautiful strata. I mean, it's a beautiful cross section in a way of the various kinds of people who might attend a gig. And I think that's a great analogy for what you're talking about, which is different people will get different things out of different forms of music. For example, I realized that I am not huge into lyrics, therefore I will never get into Bob Dylan, because if you're listening to Bob Dylan only for the music, there is not much, let's be very honest, right? Apart from a few songs, to be fair. But most people who listen to Bob Dylan do so for the lyrics, or most people who listen to Rage Against the Machine do so for the politics of the band as much as the music of the band. I don't care about that all that much. Therefore, I don't resonate with RATM as a band all that much. And I think that's okay, because different people look for different things from different art forms. And I think it's important to kind of identify what it is for you, so that you can then figure things out accordingly. So what you a while back you asked a very interesting question which I kind of glossed over, which is how do you um, you asked something like, how are you okay saying that you don't like this or don't like that, or how are you vulnerable. I think it's just about being able to defend why you like something that you do. Like, for example, right now I can tell you, I know it's not cool to bring up the name of, say, a Brian Adams in a rock discussion, because it's, snobs will look down at it. But I can defend say a song like Run to You, which I think has one of the most interesting guitar arpeggios of all time, which I would say is on par with some of the heavy metal songs which are more quote unquote evolved. To be fair, there are some absolute there are some very, very bad songs, like I Want to Be Your Underwear, for example, would top that list. But the fact is, I think if you identify what moves you, not just with respect to music but anything else, I think it just makes life a lot more interesting. This is quote I read, I heard last year, and I also referenced it in that article that you read, which is pay attention to what you pay attention to. And I think that is such a powerful quote for anything in life. Be it how you react to certain situations, be it why certain music seems to appeal to you, why certain food seems to appeal to you, why you liked that last vacation of yours. Like, asking yourself questions like this to try and find out your reasons, I think is a fairly good way to live life. Again, I don't think, I mean, I might sound like I'm in a bit of a midlife crisis when I say things like this, and I think that's deliberate, because I think this kind of realization comes at a certain point in life. So if anyone who is listening to this is like at the age of 20 or something, and kya bol rahe hai? Like, you find internal algorithm, it will not make sense to you at this point in time. You have not to put you down, but you have not lived life enough to be able to have the data points. You have not gone through a TikTok breakup is not a bad experience. You haven't been through life. You haven't been scolded by your boss. You haven't been dumped properly. You haven't faced success that really means something for another person. You have like you have to like you kind of like have to cut your teeth in the. I'm not saying that you need to slum it out or something like that. You just need to live life and have a variety of experiences drawn from, so that you can reflect. I don't think, like, there's a thing I wrote 2 years back, which I was very happy with how it came out, because it clarified a lot of my own thinking. It's an article that I wrote for a publication called Humanize, which is in your 20s you should collect dots, and your 30s you should spend time connecting them. So connect dots and collect dots. And I think it's again, all this is post facto. It sounds like a nice statement to say connect and collect, but honestly this came much, much later, because it's the way I think about things now. In my 20s, I was struggling to do a lot of things. I was struggling to find identity. I was struggling to find the kind of music that I like, the tribes that I fell into, what I wanted to do. I wanted to consume everything. I want to do this, that, like, all that sort of thing, and tried a whole bunch of random things. Failed at some things, succeeded at some things. And my early 30s, continuation of story. But also I also started getting better at identifying what I really wanted in life a little bit more. So I could see some of those patterns kind of connect, right? It's almost like this one failure that happened when I was 25. Okay, but at least I learned this thing out of it, right? Or at least this experience came out as a result of that, so on and so forth. So I strongly believe in this. I strongly believe that don't try to over intellectualize life when you're too young. If you're like under 25 and listening to this podcast, the only advice I can give you is go out and try to gather as many dots as possible, whatever that means for you, right? Your job right now is to try and have as much experience as possible. When I say experience, I don't necessarily mean that you have to lock yourself in a room and work all day. Neither do I mean that you should shoot cocaine and party every weekday. No, between these, to try a whole bunch of things. Just try things. I think that's very important. Your 20s is when you have the ability to try a whole bunch of things. And maybe repeat some of them, maybe don't do any of them again, but be aware of all of these things that you're doing, and then in your 30s somehow these will just start to make sense. And hopefully, my theory is that, I turned 40 only last year, so it's probably too early for me to say this, but if the 20s were about collecting and the 30s were about connecting, I think the 40s is where you kind of realize, okay, these are the, of all the connections that you've made, these are the three or four that I kind of like want to leverage on, if that makes sense. Like, for example, one of the things that I realize that my brain is operating in a certain way is doing exactly this, which is trying to find this internal algorithm thing. I don't know where it will go. Is it going to be a book called Find Your Internal Algorithm? I become a bestseller and all that sort of thing. Maybe, who knows? I hope that happens. But if not, then maybe the best thing to happen from there will just be that I learn to figure out what to put in my gold folder and my silver folder a little better, and I'll be happy with that as an outcome as well. Another is the way I am looking at technology. I've realized that I'm deeply fascinated by how technology impacts culture, uh, whatever shape or form that might be. So I think it's important to not over intellectualize a lot of this. Ultimately, if you are a young person listening to this, please realize that the person who is talking right now is basically somebody who is going through a midlife crisis and is trying to make sense of a lot of what has happened before and try to set some path as to what's happening, what's going to come ahead. So the point I'm trying to make is, I think it's just important to just live life, man. And by live life, I don't mean like live large or do exotic things. It's just doing a whole bunch of things and trying a whole bunch of different things, so that you have a bank of knowledge, if that makes sense, to kind of chart your own path, later when you have the time. The only thing I will say is work on your fitness. That as early as possible, do that, because it's never too early or late for that.
Yeah, this is really helpful for me as someone in my early 30s, because I
Oh,
think
perfect. Yeah. Now's the time.
I'm
Now's the time you start thinking about things. Especially if you're running podcasts like this, then you're going to
yeah.
start thinking a lot, my friend.
No, and like one thing I wanted to, like it's so interesting that you are a brand and strategy and content guy, Chuck, but we've not spoken at all about that. But in a lot of ways, you've told me so much about life just through your love for music. And I think that says something about human thinking. It's so easy to put us into boxes.
Yeah.
This is who this person is. But
Yeah.
I feel like if I really wanted to get to know your heart and soul, this conversation about music told me so much more, though I feel like the conversation about brands and content would be equally interesting, and I think it's another podcast altogether. But one question I wanted to ask you, Chuck, before we sort of wrap this up, is that I know you've listened to a lot of bands and a lot of musicians over time, right? But if you could tell me about your relationship with an artist or a particular band, and maybe give me a glimpse of both the emotional and intellectual sides of that relationship, or because I want to understand what is it like to genuinely emotionally connect with an artist. And I'm saying this because recently I was writing a piece about the Natya Shastra, which is this Indian treatise about
Mm-hmm.
how in the Indian cosmology of the arts, the focus for a lot of dramatic performances was to communicate an emotional state of being. And this completely contradicted with, because when I studied literature in university, I was almost trying to apply uh, a framework, like
Mm.
whether it's critical theory or feminism or, a particular framework to understand a text. But accessing the Natya Shastra gave me another view of the world, So my question is, if you can tell me about one recommendation of any artist, it doesn't have to be the perfect artist, but about how this artist brought some meaning into your life over time, and just a story about that artist for our listeners, to get a
I
glimpse
think
of that world.
I have to say that's a pretty tough question,
I
because
know.
you're not asked for a favorite artist or or just recommendations in general. But
True.
okay, I'll try to answer this in the spirit of what you asked, and actually it might be a good answer because it ties in a lot of what we spoke of together. The band is Opeth. Opeth is a Opeth. They are a Swedish progressive metal band. For those of you who have not listened to things that are heavier than Bon Jovi, please do not rush to listen to them immediately, because they are kind of heavy, and you might be faced with a growl if if that's not your thing, then I would suggest you don't necessarily listen to them. But here's the thing. So growing up, as in when I was getting into my rock and even the heavy rock phase, I detested growls. I thought they were just a gimmick. I thought they were just like I mean, it's just aggressiveness for the sake of aggressiveness, right? So I still don't listen to a lot of that kind of proper death metal, like the Cannibal Corpses of the world. Like I mean, it just seems like I like spicy food, but if you're giving me an entire meal of just like boot jolokia, then I'm not going to like it at all, right? So it's kind of like that. I felt a lot of that music was that way. And the first time I heard Opeth, and I remember exactly where I was the first time I heard Opeth. I was in a hospital room recovering from an operation, from my hip replacement surgery in November 2011. And a friend recommended, hey, you listen to Dream Theater, you listen to this, so give Opeth a try as well. So I said, okay, cool, I'll do that. And he did warn me that across. I said, no, I don't like crowds. He said, listen na. So I listened, and as expected, I hated it. And I told him I hated it. He said, give it time. Just keep listening and give it time. So he was so I trusted this guy's advice. And ever since, true to what he said, I've fallen in love with the band, and it's one of my favorite bands right now. In fact, if you had to put a gun to my head and ask me for my favorite song of all time, it would be "Ghost of Perdition" by Opeth from their 2005 album Ghost Reveries. And this is so the thing is, like, when this song started connecting with me, I was like, okay, why do I like this? But there are growls in there, right, which I traditionally hate. Why does this particularly make sense to me? And I struggle to find other bands that were able to do that. And it's kind of like, the only way I can say this to somebody who does not like heavy metal or listen to heavy metal is that the growls are there for a reason. It's almost like the bad guy in a movie, if that makes sense. You don't like the character on screen, but the entire plot goes away if that character is not there, right? In fact, in some ways, it's almost like the more evil and deranged the villain is, the better the movie is. Everyone knows who the star of the Batman movies were, and it was not Batman, right? It's kind of like that. And I started getting it. I started like, oh, okay, this is like going somewhere. This heaviness is leading somewhere. It's almost like, if I were to equate it to a trek, it's like, and which I often do in that article, for example, you might have seen how I equate music to treks. It's almost like this jungle that I'm just going through, full of thorns, and like, where is this all leading to? And then when you suddenly clears off and you see that lake from the top, and it's like, oh man, that was like something. Now here's a thought experiment. If you start from the base of the trek to that point directly versus going via this jungle through all that, which one hits harder? My guess is that, at least for me, again, this, I don't want to generalize any of these things that I'm saying. For me, I realized that the jungle trek was completely worth it. So this means that there are two things that are very important. That abrasive aspect is not necessary, but as if it is crafted in a way which makes the payoff, as it were, seem even more beautiful, then I'm willing to go through it. If it's just abrasive, then you're basically just walking in a jungle. I don't want that. There are some people who enjoy that. I realize that there are some people who want aggressiveness for aggressiveness' sake, right? I'm not one of those. If you're giving me aggression, there has to be some kind of payoff at the end of this. So you will see some of that algorithm thinking starting to take root over here, right? Once I start thinking about this. Opeth also has a lot of songs that are not heavy at all. There are some songs that are just genuinely beautiful. In fact, there's a song of theirs called Hope Leaves. Hope Leaves, which I heard for the first time when one of my cats passed away. In fact, you can see this urn over here which has his ashes in them. And when I heard that song for the first time, it was just about a week or so after Anna had passed away, my cat had passed away. I wept because, like, the lyrics connected, the music connected, and it was very soft. There's no growl at all. Forget growl. There's no distortion at all in the guitar. So, and that, I think my musical journey in many ways can be expressed through Opeth. Every time I listen to some of my favorite songs by them, I discover something new in those layers. I find patterns with what they kind of do. I try to get into the mind of Michael Ackerfeld, the vocalist and the composer, who's like, oh, what is he thinking? How did he manage to write these things together? And then you see patterns not in terms of melodies, but in terms of, okay, he thinks like this. If it's going like this, it's likely to come down like this. Once in a while, he surprises you by throwing in a flute or a string instrument or something like that. So, to answer your question, in short, it would be Opeth. But I also think that a band like the Beatles would come a very close second, because I think they just laid the foundation for so much of what music uh, could be. Uh, I mean, one, the songs by themselves were great, and I make it a point once every year to listen to the Beatles discography back to, cover to cover. I mean, all of their albums, back to back, and it always just makes me so emotional to see like what these guys were through. I mean, the more you know their story as well, right? The four of them together, the legacy that they would have. One final time, boys, in the studio, let's just crank this out. We know that we're going to split up after this. That was Abbey Road, the album which has the iconic photo of the four of them crossing on the zebra crossing. Let's one last time, let's we are going to go out, means we're going to go out on a high, let's do this. And then it just ends, that album ends in the most majestic way. So and you can hear traces of future genres birthed in the music of the Beatles. And to think that music was created in the 60s, which is still so fresh and relevant and resonant today, in 60 years later, it just, the weight of all of that sometimes just overwhelms me. So if there are two bands, one would be Opeth, because I think their story best encapsulates, or rather, my relationship to music is best encapsulated by them, and how they are and all that sort of thing. But I think the Beatles would come a close second, in many ways. Yeah. Don't ask for more recommendation, otherwise this will go on till midnight.
No, this is perfect. And I, for the last question, Chuck, I, just to respect time, and one of the things I wanted to also point out is that you've produced, with the podcast and your writing, without ever meeting you, I feel like I know a part of you, right? Because you've put out so much of your heart and soul into those pieces. So I will be linking the show notes to all of Chuck's
Oh, thank you.
podcasts and his writing in the show notes. And he's spoken extensively about his work in branding, about his thoughts on music, and about so much more. So that'll all be in the show notes. But for someone that does want to reach you out on the internet right now, Chuck, if you could briefly tell us about Rough Paper and the 6% Club, just to give us a glimpse of what you're doing there and what you're working on right now, that would be a great way to end this podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I professionally do one and a half things, is what I tell people. So my wife and I run a two-person brand and content consultancy called Rough Paper, where most of our work falls into brand positioning and brand strategy, website content and things like that. We've both spent a lot of time in advertising and events and all that, and we just wanted to do something where we could call the shots in terms of creative direction, where we could decide who to work with and not work with. I think that is very important for us. And honestly, it's just a way for us to fuel the life that we want. We don't have ambitions of turning this into a huge whatever. It started off 4 or 5 years back as just the two of us. It still remains just the two of us. So if anyone out there is looking for help with if your brand is confused, then come to us. I think we can help you with that. We don't do a lot of the stuff that traditional digital marketing agencies do, like social media management and all that sort of thing. We don't want to get into that. But I think our strength really is helping brands have a little bit of clarity, especially those who are just starting up and don't worry, you will be able to afford us. There are various models that we work on, ranging from hourly consulting all the way to full-blown engagements. So that's rough paper, and we've been lucky and fortunate to work on a lot of really interesting projects with some really good folks over the last few years. Some work that we are really, really proud of. Again, a whole bunch of experiments, and we are also kind of finding our voice. It's an interesting journey to do this with the person who I married. So I think that's kind of like something I'm both of us are really very proud of. That's one. That's rough paper. And the 6% Club is a program that one of my best friends, Utsav Mamoria, and I co-run. I'm wearing the T-shirt, by the way. This is 6% Club represent. Um, uh, 6% Club is a program where the the short answer is we teach people how to launch their own podcast, newsletters, and other content projects. That's the short description. um, the longer description is that we feel deeply, and this ties back to the first question I think you asked, Abhishek. We feel deeply that personal content projects are more about yourself than the audience. We, without seeming even more midlife crisis than I have already sounded in this conversation, we feel that you discover yourself through your content project. And I think for both of us, we feel that we are the best examples of that for our own references. I started Simplified, a podcast, many years ago, when I had no idea what a podcast was. It was just a random thing. There was no pressure that, oh, a podcast has to be like this or whatever. Luckily, and I will say this, we were very lucky to be one of the first few podcasts in India, which meant that one of the first few podcast houses in India said, come, we will produce everything for you. We will do, you just come, land up in the studio, produce, and do your stuff. We will take care of the production and all that for you, and if any money comes through advertising, we will split it. I said, that's a great deal. Right? That's a great deal. So because of that, we were able to do this for a long time. And I will definitely say that I found myself as a creator thinking about content itself better as a result of running Simplified, and then the two other shows that I had the confidence to launch later. And also because of this, interesting thing that happened is Cult Fit asked me to conceptualize and host their podcast as well. So there was a show called One Rep at a Time, which I conceptualized, wrote, hosted, pretty much everything for that. So that's an interesting commercial opportunity that came my way. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I feel that I have found myself as a person more because of these projects that I'm doing. I think many people tend to think of it the other way, which is, I need to, oh, I am an expert in this, therefore I will write about this. No, not really. I think it's actually the other way around, especially when it's a personal content project. And that's something that we emphasize on a lot. The program is long. It's for 8 weeks, 9 weeks, actually, if you count the graduation week as well. And the reason we keep it so long is that we believe that people, it's not about identifying a gap in the market. It's not like, oh, nobody is talking at the intersection of B2B SaaS and gaming, so let's do something with that. No, it's not about that. It's about, what do you want to do? What are the things that you are good at? What is the things that you want to explore? Even if you don't need to be good at something in order to create something, right? You just need to be interested in it to create about something. Tim Ferriss is not an expert in productivity necessarily. He just knows how to ask the right questions, and that leads to a conversation where both he and the audience can learn, right? So we try to inculcate this mindset, getting people to see themselves better. What are their unique skills? We call them unfair advantages. What are your unfair advantages? And then try to make an intersection of those, and hopefully there'll be a content project. And we tell them, listen, the thing that you start with us might not be the thing that you continue, and might not be the thing that makes you fame or whatever in the future. Your project will evolve. You will evolve as a person. The space that you're talking about will evolve, so on and so forth. But get into the habit of creating. So for us, it's a lot about self-discovery. It's the program ends up being for cohort members. A lot of it is self-discovery. A lot of it is just building discipline, because many times somebody who's 30 years old and he's been used to life in a certain way just needs somebody to crack a whip to get going. Sometimes that's really about it. So yeah, that's about it. We've run 6 cohorts. The seventh cohort starts in mid October 2025 at the time of recording this. But at all points of time, the 6% dot club is where you will see details about this, and rough paper is roughpaper.in. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm sure Abhishek will put the links in the bio, but possibly email is the best way to reach me, to be very honest. I Chuck at roughpaper.in is the handle to reach me, or Chuck at chuckofalltrades.in, whichever of these email IDs you can reach out to me at, and I will try my level best to reply. I can't reply to every single thing that comes my way, but yeah, that's I'm at chuckofalltrades on Instagram, where I do not post anything that is of use to any people. It's mostly just my cycling photos, some cat photos. I did try one reel, which seems to have worked reasonably well, where I'm trying to convert one of my old podcast ideas, The Origin of Things, into reel format. So I spent 3.5 hours on Saturday teaching myself video editing, and seems to have worked pretty well. So hopefully I'll try another one of those. So who knows where we'll be in that 1 year time, which you said. Hopefully something will work out by then, and we'll say how prescient that was. But yeah, those are the various things that I do. There might be a few other random things, but there are a few. But jokes apart, there are a few other things that I desperately want to get off the ground as well. I think I've been fortunate to have done a few things, tried a few things. The timing was right for a few things, and I'm all I can say is I'm generally excited about where things might go. Both Rough Paper and 6% Club have kind of like their own kind of paths in front of them, and I have a few ideas that I want to get off the ground too. So yeah, let's see where we go. Hopefully, this podcast mic will be used as a host rather than as a guest, which has what the poor thing has been relegated to for the last couple of years.
No, and I think the Indian podcasting world misses you, Chuck.
It's kind of you to say that.
We do want you back, and it's a random digression, but one of the people from your cohorts, Neha. So she was part of the 6% Club, and she's created this wonderful podcast called Parenthood.
Yeah,
and I just wanted to say, like, listening to her podcast, for me as someone in my early 30s, clarified my thinking about parenting a lot.
Nice.
And I just wanted to shout out to creating that community that allows, because I feel like some of the conversations she had, I would find really difficult to have with other people. And I'm so glad that podcast exists, So on that note, we come to an end of this podcast. One of the reasons I started this was to create a more kinder and empathetic version of the internet, where we hold space for each other, and where we realize that that any career takes years of, sacrifice, learning, love, and effort. And that's what we got to see in Chuck's journey. So Chuck, thank you so much. And
thank you, man. Thank you for doing this, because like I said that your content, you discover yourself through your content project. I feel like every time I'm asked to do one of these things, I think about some of these things better myself. Like I didn't connect some of the things that I myself said before this. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to actually voice them out. So yeah.
Yeah, and
thanks, man, and all the best for what you're doing. I think it's a beautiful mission. I think the internet has so much potential, and I think there's a lot of negativity just generally about not just floating around on the internet, but I think there's this joke, right, that 97% of lawyers give the rest a bad reputation, and I think the same is true for a lot of the internet. So I hope you are not just part of the 3%, but are able to grow it more. I take the 6%. You can take the 3% and grow it. But jokes apart, man, all the best for what you're doing. This is fascinating.
Thanks, Deepak. And until next time, keep learning.